Hello, so today we're going to try some new media in art. And remember, media is a fancy word for art supplies. So we're going to try some new art supplies today. We're going to try oil pastel, and we'll be trying tempera cake and liquid tempera paint. So with the oil pastel, they kind of look like crayons. They're even wrapped in a wrapper like the crayon. And if you color lightly and you don't press real hard with them, they color just like a crayon. They look just like a crayon on paper. They're real soft to the touch, and they do get on your fingers, so try your best not to get as much oil pastel on your finger. If you press hard, it'll be a dark velvety color. But try to press hard without breaking the oil pastel, because the oil pastels are soft and they will break. You can even pull the oil pastel with your finger and smear it and see what happens there. You could color another heavy color right next to the first color and then smear those together and see if they mix and make a new color, which they do. You could smear them back and forth with your finger and see what color can be made. You can even use them like a crayon. So if you have an oil pastel without a wrapper, you could use the side of them to see what will make, and that looks very much like what a crayon does when you use the side of it. You could color heavily with the side of it and see what happens. So that's what you're going to do with the oil pastel. Try to practice with those. You're going to get some oil pastel on your fingers, and I'll give you a wipe to clean those off. There's another art media that we're going to use, and this is called tempera cake. And with tempera cake, you need a cake tray, you need a water basin, and you need a stiff bristle brush. The bristles are real stiff and not soft, and so you need a stiff bristle brush. So when you're using tempera cake, the first thing you need to do is probably clean off the yellow. The yellow usually gets pretty messy. And the way that you clean off the yellow is you take your stiff bristle brush and you get it wet with clean water, and you just kind of rub that around just a little bit real quick, then get it clean again. Rub around a little bit, get it clean again. You can see it's already starting to clean up. But I just rub around just like twice, and then I get fresh water on my paintbrush. I rub around again twice, get fresh water on my paintbrush. And I'm just trying to get that reddish orange color off real fast. Alright, and you can see now my yellow is nice and bright. With tempera cake, if you have a lot of water on your paintbrush, it'll be a nice light color. If you want to make it darker, you take your stiff bristle brush and you swirl around quite a bit. Swirl around, and you keep swirling and swirling and swirling. And this helps you to get a lot of paint on your paintbrush. And that will make the color nice and dark. So if I swirl around a lot, then look how dark that is, the difference. That's a lot of water and just a little bit of water. Now the water basin has teeth at the bottom of it. Just these little lines. If you run your paintbrush over the teeth, that cleans the paintbrush off a little bit faster. So you push down, but not down too hard, and then you just rub it back and forth. You don't need to tap your paintbrush because it's just going to splatter water everywhere. If you rinse it off and you don't want the water on, pull it across the edge of the bowl to get that water off there. So now I'm going to try green. So I'm going to swirl around, get a lot of paint on my paintbrush. And I'm going to paint that dark green right next to the yellow. Okay, so then try to overlap the colors and see what happens. If they'll mix on your paper, rinse your paintbrush off, try a new color, maybe try a lot of water this time, and see what happens. Rinse your paintbrush off. You have to rinse your paintbrush off between each color. And this is what red looks like with a lot of water. Then you can go back and swirl again. And you got to swirl around a bunch of times. Get a lot of paint on your paintbrush and then see what happens. But if I take this red paintbrush and I touch it on my yellow, then it messes up the yellow for the whole table. So you've really got to clean your paintbrush off so that you don't mess up the colors for the people at your table. You're sharing this paint with other people. So don't use a messy paintbrush on all the colors. After you use one color, so I'm going to use orange, after you're done using that color, rinse your paintbrush off before you change into a new color. And tempera cake dries pretty fast, so that's a really neat thing about it. And then you can see that it'll also bleed and run together. So my purple and my red overlapped and they were really wet, and so that dark red is bleeding and moving up into the purple, and it creates a nice texture. So I want you to practice with tempera cake. And next we're going to try liquid tempera paint. So with this paint, you want a nice soft paintbrush. You want a sponge to dry your paintbrush off, and you need another water basin to rinse your paintbrush off between colors. Because just like with the tempera cakes, you can't take a messy paintbrush and touch a new color, or it'll mess up that color for everybody else. So with liquid tempera, you do not need a wet paintbrush. So before, with the tempera cakes, we got our paintbrush wet, and then we swirled it around on the cake, and then we painted. With liquid tempera, it's already wet, so we don't need water on our paintbrush. In fact, we want a dry paintbrush. So my paintbrush is dry, has no water on it. I'm gonna pick up some green paint and just see what I can do. Maybe I can do a fat line of green, and then a thin line of green. I'm out of green, so I want to switch my colors. I can't take this paintbrush and put it in a new color because it'll mess up that new color with this green paint. So I have to rinse my paintbrush off. I'm going to use the teeth at the bottom of the water basin. Get that paint off my paintbrush. Then I need to dry it on the sponge. I'm just going to pull my paintbrush across the sponge. I'm not pushing it, because if I push it, then it'll make it all spiky and not a nice paintbrush. And I don't put my fingers on the paintbrush because I don't need to get paint on it. And then I'm going to try a new color. Maybe see what I can paint. Maybe thin line, and then try to use the side of the paintbrush and push down. With this kind of paintbrush, if you keep it high on its tiptoes and you don't push really hard, you get a nice thin line. But when you push down hard, then you get a wide fat line. So try to practice with that. Try to maybe mix the colors on your paper and see what happens. But then don't take this messy paintbrush and put it back in that color. You gotta rinse it off again. Dry it off. And maybe try a new color. And see what happens when that overlaps with the blue. That makes a nice pretty purple. So then you're gonna try liquid tempera and see what it can do. And those are the new media that we're going to try today. So the art media that we use today are oil pastel, tempera cakes, which are the tempera dried in these hard circles, and then liquid tempera, which is like a tube of tempera paint. The medias that we try to remember, media is a fancy word for art supply.